The day is Tuesday, the 6th of June, 1944. The world holds its breath as the largest amphibious invasion in history is set to unfold. Operation Overlord, known to history as D-Day, is a moment of unprecedented ambition and scale. In this titanic gathering of men and machines, hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, sailors, and airmen had come together to assault a 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coast and begin the liberation of Western Europe, 4 years after the Allies were kicked off the continent. The names of the 5 beaches allocated to British, American, and Canadian forces have gone down in legend: Sword, Gold, Juno, Omaha, and Utah. The Allies had achieved the element of surprise, and although casualties were taken, the Allies were generally successful in overwhelming and neutralizing the largely understrength, overstretched, and ill-prepared German defenders. At least this was the case on 4 out of 5 of the beaches, with the notable exception being Omaha, or Bloody Omaha as it came to be known, as on this beach, slaughter took place. Serving as the inspiration for the film Saving Private Ryan, the epic struggle of American forces on Omaha Beach was the closest that any Allied landing force came to defeat that day. But what was it on Omaha Beach that led to such high American casualties and almost total disaster? Well, as we will see, it was a complex combination of factors relating to the natural landscape, the skill of the German defenders, as well as American failures in the attack plan. The American landings on D-Day were to be carried out by the US First Army, under the command of the famous General Omar Bradley. The US 7th Corps was assigned Utah Beach, whilst the 5th Corps was given the task of storming Omaha. Within the 5th Corps, it was the battle-hardened US 1st Division, known as the Big Red One, who would attack the eastern portion of the beach, whilst the far less experienced US 29th Division, known as the Blue and Grey Division, would attack the western portion. But the challenge that both veteran and raw recruit faced, that they had no control over, was nature, and this was at both land and sea. The geography at Omaha Beach turned it into a natural fortress for the German defenders. Unlike some of the other landing sites, Omaha is characterized by wide open sands overlooked by steep bluffs which rise to 30 meters or 100 foot in height. Naturally, German forces had exploited these bluffs, and they fortified the heights with bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery. From these elevated positions, they had an almost unobstructed line of sight and fire over the entire beach, making it incredibly difficult for assaulting American troops to advance. This iconic photograph, named Into the Jaws of Death, taken by American photographer Robert Sargent, shows just how daunting a task American troops on the beaches faced. It can be seen from the background of the photo the sheer size and scale of the heights that the attacking troops must assail, all the while knowing that German defenders would be waiting atop them. In comparison to this photo taken from a landing craft on the much flatter Utah beach, it can be seen why the troops on Omaha had such a greater task and in the end took much greater casualties. As if this wasn't enough, the exits to the beach between the high bluffs, known as draws, created natural bottlenecks, concentrating American troops in a narrow space, making them incredibly vulnerable to German fire. Meanwhile, the situation at sea was fraught with difficulty as the invading force approached. Understanding the importance of armoured support, the Americans intended to deploy duplex drive or DD Sherman tanks. These were tanks that were modified to make them amphibious, and they were deployed over 4 kilometers off the coast of Omaha. Whilst these tanks had been successfully tested in English and Scottish lakes, they hadn't been tested out at sea. This led to great tragedy for the American tank crews, as that day of the 6th of June the seas were rough, the waves were 6 to 8 foot high, the tanks were swamped, and many of them sank to the bottom. Of the 29 DD tanks put into the sea by the 741st Tank Battalion, only 2 made it to the beach. This deprived the infantry of much-needed armoured support, which would have been invaluable against the German bunkers on the coast. The landing craft also suffered from the rough waters of the English Channel. The heavy chop caused many landing craft to arrive later than planned, disrupting the carefully timed landing schedule. It also caused others to miss their designated landing zones. Units were often disorganized and landed far from their intended positions. Other landing craft were swamped or even capsized by the rough seas. This led to loss of their equipment, vehicles, and personnel before they even reached the shore, and other soldiers had to jump into deep water and wade through the strong surf, making them vulnerable to enemy fire and exhaustion. For those troops that had made it to the beach, their equipment and supplies were often soaked or lost in the rough seas. Radios, weapons, and other critical gear were damaged or rendered unusable, further hampering the troops' ability to organize and mount an effective assault. But ultimately, it was the German troops themselves who inflicted heavy casualties on the Americans. But what set apart the defenders at Omaha Beach compared to the other 4 landings? The answer lies with the formidable German 352nd Infantry Division. Unlike other German divisions on the Normandy coast that were static, the 352nd was a versatile field division. Although containing fresh conscripts, it also boasted a significant number of veterans, seasoned soldiers who had seen combat on the Eastern Front and other theatres of war. These veterans brought invaluable experience, battlefield tactics, and honed marksmanship, making them a formidable opponent for the invading Americans. But it wasn't just experience that made them so deadly, it was the wide array of weapons they employed, including the devastating German MG-42. Nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw, this formidable machine gun could fire 1,500 rounds per minute. That's around 25 per second. The MG-42 was so intimidating to American GIs that the US War Department created a specific training film to combat the weapon's psychological effect on its soldiers. And their fears were not unfounded. The MG-42 tore through American troops, causing dozens of casualties in seconds as the beleaguered infantry tried to exit the landing craft. The entire beach was filled with lead, creating a hellish landscape as bullets bounced in the sand and in the water as soldiers desperately tried to hunker down and find some cover. But the MG-42 wasn't alone. German anti-tank guns, artillery and mortars also added to this maelstrom of chaos and carnage. And this brings us to the various American failures, whether on the strategic or tactical level, as American planners had not anticipated a fight with the German 352nd Division. In a major intelligence failure, it was thought the resistance at Omaha Beach would be light, as it was believed that only a few hundred soldiers of the second-rate German 716th Division were present on the beach. Crucially, the Allies had failed to realise that Rommel had reorganised the defences of Normandy and moved the German 352nd Division into position on the coast at Omaha Beach, meaning they didn't just face a handful of low morale and under-equipped men, but instead went into battle against well-prepared, well-supplied and determined defenders. And to compound the intelligence failure, the pre-landing bombardment that was designed to take out German positions had little to no success. The bombers that were used were designed for high-altitude strategic bombing, best for targeting large industrial complexes and cities, but at these altitudes their accuracy was limited, especially against small, well-defended targets like bunkers. Most of the bombs dropped failed to hit their targets and landed harmlessly inland behind the defences. The naval bombardment hardly fared differently. A variety of ships bombarded the French coast, hoping to target the German positions like the bombers. However, their barrages barely lasted 40 minutes. There was a distinct lack of firepower, and inaccuracy was also a problem, as they were trying to hit small targets at a long range. The Allies had seriously underestimated the quality of German engineering. Their defences were heavily fortified with reinforced concrete bunkers, pillboxes and other strongpoints designed to withstand heavy bombardment, and these positions were strategically located on the high ground of the bluffs or behind other natural obstacles, making them incredibly difficult for American forces to target. And so it was this combination of factors, geographical challenges, German stubbornness and experience, and American failures, which led to the widespread spilling of American blood at Omaha Beach. Estimates of the number of casualties at Omaha Beach vary wildly, but what all can agree is they were very heavy. Some put it as low as 2,000, and some as high as 5,000, killed, wounded, or missing. And it is perhaps because of these high casualties and the ferocity of the battle that Omaha Beach has become iconic in both American and military history. American forces that day went through hell. Amidst the blood-soaked sands, they showed unyielding spirit. Their determination and bravery won the day, despite the serious risk of defeat. Those American young men would go on to inspire generations with their bravery and sacrifice. Charging forward into relentless enemy fire, with the ever-present prospect of death, the great sacrifice and bravery of the men at Omaha Beach on the 6th of June 1944 is remembered and commemorated 80 years on, with the responsibility now falling on future generations to tell their story. Special shout out goes to my Patreon supporters. Their names are on the screen right now. If you'd like to join them and support this channel, there is a link in the description below. Please like, subscribe, comment what you thought, and I will see you next time.